Okay, well, I just want to introduce two of very fine gentlemen, very knowledgeable men who have a lot to tell us about the Syllabus of Errors.
Of Pope Pius IX?
Of Pope Pius IX. Charles Coulombe and Bill Biersach.
Yay! Huzzah! Thank you very much, Steve. I feel like I'm at the Renaissance Fair. That's great.
Well, this is the Renaissance Fair.
Ooh, which Renaissance?
Where's the maypole? It's on the other side of that tree.
I think this is it. We'll have to dance.
Now, before we get to the syllabus, we have something else to go into first.
Yeah, we've got to, before we could really talk about the Syllabus of Errors, ladies and gentlemen, we've got to, oh, he's got Denziger. He wants to make sure we didn't alter the copy. Yeah, we want to get into an important topic before we even touch the Syllabus of Errors. Now, when you say Syllabus of Errors, what is an error? We think of it today as, you know, you get your sum wrong, or you took the wrong turn on Doheny Boulevard and ended up in Beverly Hills, or whatever. That was what we think error is. You know, it's not that bad a deal. It's okay. But error meant something different to, well, most generations of Catholics, if not to us. Error meant something evil. Evil. What do they mean, evil?
Evil is anything that'll take you to hell.
Oh, well, okay. I accept that as one view. Yeah, sure. I can see that.
Well, can we all see that as evil is what will take you to hell? I mean, we're all of us are headed towards one of two destinations, right? Heaven or hell.
Hate to cut to the chase like that, but ultimately that's all there is in life.
So anything that takes you to hell is evil.
And therefore, anything that takes you to heaven is... Boy, some of us are awake. That's great. Well, that's right. So we're all clear on what evil is. But you know what we have lost, really, in our day? Is a sense of the horror of evil. We think of evil as something sort of glamorous, something perhaps in a tuxedo. Well,
yeah.
Actually, that isn't a bad simile.
Something like Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Dracula.
Okay.
I bid you welcome.
Listen to them, children of the night.
What music they make.
Okay, we'll dispense with any more Bela Lugosi imitations.
I like Bela Lugosi imitations.
Yes, but they're all bad.
Oh, well, there's that.
But, all right, I'm sure all of you have seen the movie starring Bela Lugosi.
Have we all seen the movie with Dracula? Show of hands. Sure. Those who have not, the two youngest have not seen Dracula.
This is amazing.
What's that? You saw Love at First Bite. Well,
not exactly the same.
Ah, we're going to get to that. Glad you asked that question.
Okay, first, how many of you have read the book? Okay. Now,
readers among us. I hate those people.
All right, now, in the book, the character Dracula is a rather sophisticated fellow that wears only formal wear and goes to the opera and in his spare time sucks people dry of their blood.
And condemns them, furthermore, very often, not always, but very often, to a loathsome existence just like his own.
In the book, we have a slightly different character than we have in the movie. And we have a slightly different way of fighting this character than we have in the movie. Okay, in the book, now Bram Stoker, as I recall, was an apostate Catholic. He did some research in the British Museum on vampires and then decided, oh, well, he'd make up his own anyway. Because the vampire in here is not the vampire of folklore. Because vampires of folklore did not wear tuxedos and go to the opera. They mostly lived in graveyards and killed people and were foul and disgusting and smelled bad.
Because they were, in fact, possessed corpses. Remember the exorcist, Linda Blair? Well, according to the old folklore, if Linda Blair had been dead at the time that her body was under other occupation, she would have been a vampire.
Yeah, it's the lowest form of demon possession, actually.
This isn't something you get Asmodeus or Beelzebub into. You know, this is Demon Bob.
Yeah, only low-life demons end up becoming vampires because, I mean, all the highbrows are out there possessing living people, right? So you only get dunces as vampires. But nonetheless, the vampire, the classic vampire of folklore, is actually a perversion of Christ's resurrection. That's actually the point, is that Jesus rose from the dead, with a glorified body, and Satan mimics this, okay, but in a twisted way, and brings corpses to life.
That's why they call him the ape of God.
And these creatures could be killed by driving stakes through their hearts, and they could be cornered by using holy things like relics, the Blessed Sacrament, the Rosary, sacramentals, holy water. And in the book, Bram Stoker carried a lot of that over, though of course he didn't want to mention the word Catholic, so he just somehow didn't. All right?
And yet, what else could it be unless you're going to have Protestants running around with rosaries and communion hosts? So.
Right, this becomes problematic. And so when this was made into a movie, a lot of that was left out. In other words, nowhere in the movie do they prevent Dracula from going to one of his abodes by leaving the Blessed Sacrament there, or putting a relic there, or blessing the ground with holy water. Okay, in the movie there's only 2 references to the crucifix at all. One is at the beginning of the film, when one of the peasant women puts a rosary.
Wear this for your mother.
Okay, and that prevents the first bloodletting, but not for long. And then at halfway through the movie, Van Helsing holds up a crucifix and fends off Dracula with it, but a very small crucifix. It's not like big, and it's no holy water. You know, it's just a little thing. All right, well, anyway, as you go down through the years, the vampire movies have taken more and more license, so that the further away you get from real vampires, the less and less it takes Catholic things to deal with them. And when you finally get down to Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, you have a vampire that A, doesn't know if there's a God or not, doesn't know if he's evil or not. Vampirism to him is sort of
it's a lifestyle choice.
It's a condition, sort of like his concurrent homosexuality.
Yeah.
All right, so you have.
Are they going to legalize vampire marriages, do you think?
Probably. But the problem is, evil has to be measured against that which is good. And if you no longer measure it against that which is good, then you don't have anything that makes sense anymore.
In the old folklore, since the opposite of the vampire, the thing that drove him off, were the sacramentals and the ministrations of the church. You could say that the opposite, in the old folklore, the opposite of evil, i.e. the satanic vampire, was good, i.e. the church. Evil versus good. Very simple. But, as Professor Biersach is showing us so masterfully, the element of good has been on the wane in the evolution of the vampire story. So that now, the opposite of the quote-unquote evil vampire is no longer good. It's just drivel.
And it even gets into movies where you take it a step further, like Ghostbusters 2, where the evil baron that's living in this painting and who's taking over New York City is conquered not by a crucifix, not by holy water, not by the Blessed Sacrament, but by the Statue of Liberty.
Makes me proud to be an American.
And even when Bill Murray says, you know, we're gonna defeat him with good, what he means is good times, which means getting everybody in New York to sing about your love has taken me higher. So this defeats an evil baron?
I think not.
Right? Is laughter in and of itself a good that can defeat evil?
You see, we have lost in our society the sense of evil. We don't know what evil is. We don't have a disgust for it, the way our ancestors did. With us, it is again a lifestyle choice, a possibility. Got the numbers wrong. And,
well, you know, if we as a culture have lost our sense of evil, could we be the first culture that's ever done that?
sure, we must be. I mean, after all, human beings always tend naturally to the good when left to themselves, don't they?
Yeah, like Germany around 1940.
Yeah? Okay, there was a little
All
problem
those
there.
Germans were just drawn to the good, weren't they? It was called Nazism.
Okay, well, maybe there was a little problem there. And if you were going to go that way, you could take the Soviet Union.
Ah, yeah, communism. Let's lap that up. It must be good.
Well, we know it must be good. A lot of people who, for the LA Times, are for it. But never mind. But see, again, we come to an unpleasant problem here. If a whole society, now mind you, there were, of course, elements of resistance, we know that, but if the general tone of a whole society can be fundamentally wrong, could it happen here? Could we be just as lost in space, morally and spiritually, as they were? One of the tendencies that we have as a people, particularly as Americans, because we're the biggest and the best, yeah, is we tend to think that we are outside and above history. It can't happen here. We're just so wonderful we don't know what to do with ourselves. And our view of things, our opinions, are what count. Nothing else. Don't believe me? Read the LA Times. You know what, I don't know, should we talk a little bit about the 7 martyred monks?
Sure.
All right. Anyone here read the LA Times religiously the way I do? No. All right. Well, you may remember that today there was the report of these 7 monks who got killed in Algeria. And they were killed by these Algerian rebels who didn't like them very much. Well, this Cistercian father, quoted in the Times, said, and I quote, "We used to have martyrs for the faith. Now," he said happily, "we have martyrs for dialogue." And that's what these folks are being presented as, ladies and gentlemen, martyrs for dialogue, not the faith. Now, of course, there isn't a problem here, because it was the Cistercian abbot who said it, and I would hate to go against a member of the hierarchy. But what kind of a mindset does that reflect?
Would you want to shed your blood for a conversation?
I have shed my blood over several, but it wasn't willing, I assure you.
Okay, another thing is, in our culture, we tend to think of evil as being an action that we do, like killing somebody or robbing a bank.
That's evil.
These are obvious evils.
Yeah.
Okay, but can a thought be evil? And I don't just mean a dirty thought. I mean, can an error held as truth be evil? If you staunchly believe in something that is wrong in the eyes of God, is that evil?
Well,
There used to be a third creed in the Catholic Church. Did you know that?
third creed.
Yeah, there was the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed.
That's all there are.
No, there's another one.
No, don't mention it.
Somehow,
You're going to mention it. I know
I'm
you're
going to
gonna
mention it. I have a copy of it right here. It's called the Athanasian Creed.
Yeah, well, that's just because it was named after St. Athanasius. That doesn't mean we have to listen to it.
Well, yeah, I suppose. Except up until Vatican II, when the office of prime was deleted, priests all over the world used to say the Athanasian Creed multitudinous times every year.
32 Sundays, in fact. But now they still have to say it once on Trinity Sunday.
Well, poor them. It's a long creed. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just want to read one sentence from it. Okay? Because if you've ever read it, you'd know it's the most beautiful exposition on the doctrine of the Trinity and the Incarnation. And it comes from the early times in the church when these things were all being worked out and defined.
And fought over.
And fought over.
Speaking of dying over a conversation.
And so after a long description of what the Blessed Trinity is, there's a sentence here. It says, "He therefore who desires to be saved must think thus about the Trinity."
Are you saying thoughts have consequences?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
And so if someone does not think thus about the Trinity, according to our ancestors, they were in a state of evil and therefore could not save their souls. Dangerous stuff.
Oh, but we don't believe that anymore. Dare we hope all men be saved?
No.
Okay. Didn't share that
No,
part.
now dialogue is what's important.
Dialogue you. What you might say then is that we're sort of wandering about in a fantasy land.
Well, I guess what we could say is that those of us who call ourselves traditionalists and conservatives often fall into a funny little crevice somewhere where we may have a great devotion for, say, the Latin Mass and wanting to have that restored.
I like that.
Or a great love of benedictions.
Oh, I love benedictions.
And the smell of incense.
Beautiful.
And things of that nature.
The Sacred Heart.
But when it comes to exploring what the saints taught in terms of what was Catholicism, we come up against a certain brick wall.
Oh, don't be silly. We're supposed to emulate the saints, not believe them.
Yes, well, that's the brick wall I'm talking about, is that today saints have become these plaster things that you find in gardens, with St. Francis with kind of this myopic look on his face holding up a sparrow, you know, and he barely has the strength to hold it up, you know, and yet this was a man who was a valiant soldier.
Spoke French.
And
that's how he got his name, because he was one of the only few people in his village that could speak French.
And he was
Francesco.
the one who dared a sultan to burn him alive.
Yeah, what did he tell the sultan?
Not with a little sparrow in his hand, you know.
Oh, Sultan.
Yeah. He was... Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that today we have replaced holiness with the idea of being nice with one another, never offending one another. But if you read the writings of the saints, you find that often they offended a lot of people. And in fact, a founder of our faith, Jesus Christ, had a great knack for offending people. And nowhere can I find a place where he said that you get to heaven by being nice.
Didn't he say, be thou nice even as your heavenly Father is nice?
No, he didn't.
Oh, my mistake.
All right. Now, if as a culture we have slipped a few gears, and as Catholics we want to go to heaven, sooner or later...
There's a problem.
Sooner or later we've got to deal with this. And the question is, do we want to? Now, that's sort of why you and I came here tonight, was to point out that maybe there are some conflicts in the way we think with the way people that we call saints think or thought.
Or even with something that we once upon a time called the magisterium, defined. Maybe that too. I should hope not. But...
Well, this brings to mind...
the Syllabus of Errors.
We're finally getting to it, folks.
You thought we were just rambling, but there was a point here.
Yes.
And the point is that in this fantasy land mentality that we live in, where nice is the equal of good, where the difference between truth and error is minimal, and where what you believe doesn't matter insofar as your eternal destiny goes, these are not new ideas. They were all the rage back in the 19th century. They're kind of outmoded ideas. And way back in the 1870s, a gentleman called Pope Pius IX, who happened to be Pope at the time, hence the title, gave us a reality check. He gave us something for us, a sort of doctrinal examen of conscience. You know, we all know about the moral examen of conscience. We don't really mind going over our morals too much because, you know, we're we're less concerned about them perhaps than we are about dogmatic beliefs. But what you have here in the Syllabus of Errors is a dogmatic examen of conscience. Now, Professor Biersach and myself are a little bit hampered in exploring the syllabus with you tonight, to the extent that it has 60 condemned propositions.
80.
I'm sorry.
There's 80 condemned propositions, and if we spent 5 minutes on each one, we would be here past midnight.
Which we wouldn't mind, but you might get tired of it.
Right.
Now,
so we've gone through and just picked a few.
Of the more challenging ones.
But we encourage you to take this home and read it for yourself.
And see where you see where you stack up. See how these things affect you. If your first reaction to one of these condemned propositions is, well,
I don't believe that. I couldn't possibly buy that.
Well then you've got a problem.
Then 100 years ago, you could have not called yourself a Catholic.
Of course, we've gotten beyond that now. We could die for dialogue. Now,
if your copy starts with page 433, is that what it says in the corner? Okay. Well, let me just read a it didn't get in that bunch then. Here's a paragraph from the introduction that Pope Pius IX wrote. Okay, he says, "In such great perversity of evil opinions, therefore, we," meaning the Pope, "we, truly mindful of our apostolic duty, and especially solicitous about our most holy religion, about sound doctrine and salvation of souls divinely entrusted to us, and about the good of human society itself, have decided to lift our apostolic voice again, and so all and each evil opinion and doctrine individually mentioned in this letter by our apostolic authority we reject, proscribe, and condemn. And we wish and command that they be considered as absolutely rejected, proscribed, and condemned by all the sons of the Catholic Church.
And it must be borne in mind when we are going over these particular condemned propositions, it must be borne in mind that when the Pope says that they are errors, he means they are evil. They are horrid. They are like the vampire of folklore rising from his grave and breathing his loathsome breath upon you, preparatory to taking the life out of you. Because these propositions will take you to hell if you believe them fully and firmly at the time of your death. Now, the other thing that should be pointed out also is that Pius IX, if you look in the things at the end, he will tell you from which of his own letters and so forth he got them. But it's very important to bear in mind that an encyclical in those days was a bit different from what they are now. What we're used to in encyclicals are the popes quoting themselves, or Vatican II. Prior to about 1963, papal encyclicals as teaching documents did not stand on their own. And if you read the older encyclicals, you'll find that the popes are continually, when they make a point that seems a bit strange or odd, they quote fathers, doctors, past papal definitions, past conciliar definitions. They don't expect you to take anything on their say-so by itself, unless, of course, it's something like the Immaculate Conception or the Assumption. And even then, they always give a long justification as to why they did it anyway. That's a very important thing. So what you're seeing here, what he is saying, there's been a lot of question, is the syllabus infallible? And to be honest with you, this is not something that has ever been answered. But what can be said, and it's certainly true, is that the Pope is quoting here, is teaching here from past infallible teaching. Similarly, if you read Humanae Vitae, the Paul VI's condemnation of birth control, it's often said, oh, well, it's an encyclical, it's not infallible, we don't have to care. Well, that would be true if it was the Pope saying that there's no life on the moon, or that there is life on the moon. But, as in Humanae Vitae, he was quoting past infallible teaching. So too with the syllabus. It's very important we get these things down. Otherwise, the questions and answers, someone's going to say, wait a minute, is that infallible? So the answer is, the form is not infallible, but the content is.
Yes, if you, those of you who are studious, you can look up the footnotes yourself. You can look up the allocutions. We didn't make this up. This is what he wrote, and these are his own citations.
As they say back home, deal with it.
Okay, we must press on.
All right.
So,
you want to do the first one, or shall I?
Let me do the first one.
You do the first one.
Okay. Syllabus number 1. Now, as we read these things, they are all stated as positive statements, which means you have to preface each one with the phrase, it is evil to believe that. Otherwise, you're going to get into all kinds of trouble. Okay.
You'll think he's telling you to believe all this stuff.
That's why the paragraph I just read, where he says, these things are to be condemned by all good sons of the Catholic Church, and then he states them. All right, so, number 1, it is evil to believe that no supreme, all-wise, and all-provident divine Godhead exists, distinct from this world of things, and God is the same as the nature of things, and therefore liable to changes. Now, let me just stop right there. Okay, in other words, he's condemning naturalism.
Also
right
sounds like he's just done Intellect de Chardin. Go ahead.
Oh, he'll do that even more in a moment. Okay, and God comes into being in man and in the universe, and all things are God, and they have the same substance of God. In other words, this whole Chardinian idea that God is gradually evolving matter into spirit and all this stuff.
It's all one in the
It's all condemned. Okay, it is also evil to believe that God is one and the same as the world. Okay, to assume that God and the world are the same thing, wrong. And therefore also spirit is one and the same as matter. Again, Chardin shot down. It is, let's see.
Necessity with liberty.
The true with the false, the good with the evil, and the just with the unjust. In other words, the merging of all these opposites is condemned. It's a far-reaching paragraph right at the front. It's like, bam, okay. Got that, everybody?
And you often hear you often hear people say things like, well, in a larger sense, what does it all matter anyway? What Pius IX is telling you is, oh yes, it matters. It matters very much. That's what Pius IX is telling you. Which brings us, I guess, into number 2. I get the short one. Good. All action of God upon men and the world must be denied. Now, that seems obvious to you until you pick up something like Michael Novak's Spirit of Democratic Capitalism, in which dear Dr. Novak tells us that Catholics must cease to behave as though the Incarnation made a difference in history. Now, you can't believe that. The Incarnation did make a difference in history. We're not playing on the same card as we used to. Things have changed, gang. And to pretend that they haven't, to pretend that anything in human affairs could be done or said without reference to divine truth is an evil lie.
Okay, number 3. It is evil. It will take you to hell if you believe that. Human reason, with absolutely no regard to God, is the only judge of the true and the false, the good and the evil. It is a law unto itself, and is, by its own natural powers, sufficient to provide for the good of individuals and of peoples. Human reason. Who are we to judge God?
Who is my counselor, it says. And yet we often do that, don't we? I can't believe that. Who cares what you can believe? Who cares what I can believe? It's not up to us. That's the whole point of Revelation, ladies and gentlemen. Precisely because it doesn't matter what you or I would come up with on our own. That's why the Church has Scripture and tradition. That's why Revelation exists. Because God, knowing that reason, while it can work out some things on its own, is flawed, knew we would never get at the thing all by ourselves, simply with our natural powers. And yet, having accepted Revelation as we think, we then, as Catholics, try to bend it to our own view of things. This is what we call cafeteria Catholicism, with which some of you may be aware.
Okay, well, number 4 flows out of 3. You might as well keep going.
Oh boy, okay.
It is evil.
It is evil to believe that all truths of religion flow from the natural power of human reason. Hence, reason is the chief norm by which man can and should come to a knowledge of all truths of whatever kind. Well, again, I started on that, ladies and gentlemen, but I'll finish it. You know, again and again, when things like the Syllabus, or the Syllabus of Errors of Pius X, in Pascendi and Lamentabili, the anti-modernist things, when these are brought up, how many times will you hear people, even clerics, say, I can't believe that. You can't expect, oh, well, I'm a Catholic, but I don't believe that. Well, if you don't believe that, you're not a Catholic. End of story. I mean, one isn't forced to be a Catholic, and in this day and age, it's not going to get you any kudos. You won't get, the only club you can join is the Knights of Columbus.
Oh, boy. Okay, let's skip a few.
Okay, 2.
And get to number 7. I can't read number 7 without thinking of about 100 covers of Time magazine, the religious opinions section of the Times.
My freshman religion class, the Bible is Literature, with
And
Father Riley, OP.
And my freshman religion class, which will remain anonymous. Okay, number 7. It is evil to believe that the prophecies and miracles described and related in sacred scripture are the inventions of poets. And the mysteries of the Christian faith are the culmination of philosophical investigations. And the books of both testaments are contained mystical inventions. And mythical inventions. And Jesus Christ himself is a mythical fiction.
I would like to say in that regard that most of our modernist folk will not go so far as to say, they'll say the rest of it. They won't say Jesus Christ is a mythical fiction, but what they will do is they'll say, well, there's a difference between the Christ of faith and the Jesus of history. I believe in the Jesus of history. Which, of course, means that they don't believe in Jesus Christ as he has revealed himself to the church. I remember the late lamented Karl Rahner.
Karl Rahner, yes.
Who said, my faith wouldn't be affected in the least if we found the bones of Christ in the desert. Well, I'll tell you what, if it wouldn't be affected by that, I don't see what would affect it or what it means anyway. You know, if there be no resurrection, your faith is vain. And if it doesn't matter whether it happened or not, then you don't really believe it. And if that's the case, I don't know what kind of faith you've got. Well, enough to become a wealthy Jesuit, but other than that, I don't know. What a contradiction in terms, a wealthy Jesuit, but never mind.
Well, number 8.
Number 8. Oh, boy. This is a short one. Since human reason...
It is evil to believe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. That's right. If I just said it straight out, people would say, oh, okay, well...
No, a lot of people would agree with you
Yeah.
and they think they're fine.
Well, no one here, of course. But
No, not here.
it is evil to believe that, since human reason is equal to religion itself, therefore, theological studies must be conducted just as the philosophical. Okay, now, that may sound a little bit pie in the sky by and by. What does it mean to me? I'll tell you what it means. And it goes right back to the ordination, not the ordination, but the education, rather, of priests. In seminaries all over America, after Vatican II, an interesting change was made. What had been departments of dogmatic theology became departments of systematic theology. Theology, the teaching of theology was reoriented away from accepting revelation as a given to, even as he says, conducting it just as a philosophical education. Do you know the difference? Oh, you tell
So
me.
that's what I was going to say.
All right, you tell me.
Okay, the difference between theology and philosophy. The theologian already knows the answer because it's in Revelation. He knows the attributes of God, he knows there's a Trinity, he knows all these things, and therefore everything he considers flows from that.
He has to work out perhaps how they apply to different things and so on. But the basic questions are already answered. What he's looking for is application.
Right, whereas the philosopher doesn't have a clue.
Well, he says he loves truth and he's looking for an ultimate end.
Right, but he doesn't know what the end is. So he can squirrel and scramble any direction he wants and go down in history as a great philosopher. Unfortunately, the kind of theologians we have today don't believe that there's an answer. They have no answer at the end. So they're just philosophers.
One of my favorite philosophers, of course, was Alfred North Whitehead of Harvard, who's, don't laugh at Alfred North Whitehead, he had 3
I
names.
can't help it.
But
That's how I am laughing.
one of my favorite quotes of his was, "The only thing we can say with certainty is that at times there appears to be something, and at times it appears to be plural."
That's what I was laughing about.
That's one of my favorites, though. I mean, I live by that.
I mean, hey, this is something to die for.
Sure, dialogue.
I'd spill my blood for that kind of conclusion any day.
I'd spill my blood for your right
There's
to say it.
something out there, and hey, it's like plural. Hey.
One of the best refutations of Alfred North Whitehead I ever heard, a priest in Boston was asked, how would you refute him? And there was a rock there, and he kicked it, and he said, like that. But anyway.
Okay.
Moving right along.
Well, we're going to skip through modified rationalism because they all pretty much flow from each other and say basically the same kind of thing with different twists. But we have to press on, so we're going to skip to number 15.
Section 3.
Indifferentism and latitudinarianism.
I suffered from that once. I had to have my gallstones removed. It was
Right.
terrible.
Okay, number 15. It is evil to believe that every man is free to embrace and profess that religion which he, led by the light of reason, thinks to be the true religion.
But that's what I was taught in high school at Bishop Alamany High by Brother Lucius, CFX. He taught me in comparative religions that you had to follow your conscience into whatever religion you were led.
Well, that's fine.
He was a brother. Where'd you get your degree in theology?
Well, I don't have one.
Oh, see?
But see, I have the Syllabus of Errors here.
Oh,
And it tells me that in 1864, the Supreme Pontiff of the Catholic Church declared to the world that it is evil to believe or profess that every man is free to embrace and profess that religion which he, led by the light of reason, thinks to be the true religion. Now that's got to sit in a few people's craws.
that's a downer. It's a downer.
Well, it could be downer for various reasons. Okay, is it a downer because it sounds
Harsh.
harsh?
Harsh.
Or is it a downer because you don't want to think this way?
Both. I don't want to think this way, and it's because it's harsh. It says,
Okay.
I'm a nice person. And niceness is next to godliness. It says it right there in the Bible.
Ah. Well, why don't you read the next one?
I hate it when he gets chummy.
Yes.
Okay.
We're in this together. The chain is tight around us now, and they're about to throw the anchor into the Tiber.
It gets worse and worse, I assure you. The man was on a roll. It is evil to believe that, in the worship of any religion whatever, men can find the way to eternal salvation and can attain eternal salvation. Now,
Oh, no, wait a minute. I thought all religions are good, and they all take us to God.
they all do. That's what Brother Lucius CFX taught me at Bishop Alamany High.
Yeah, but that's not what this says.
Point is that, well, as Groucho Marx said, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? No, there is a real problem here. And the thing is, though, I'd like to point out that 16 follows from 15. See, if you just said 15 by itself, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense. If everyone can go to heaven in his own way, well then, certainly they are free to embrace and profess that religion which he, led by the light of reason, thinks to be the true religion. Because you can get saved in them. Otherwise, it's all mental gymnastics. And, you know, I mean, mind you, salvation may be important to you all. But, and here's the crux of the problem, we always have to cut down to the chase. If, as Pius IX tells us, it is wrong to believe that in the worship of any religion, whatever, men can find the way, etc., to eternal salvation, then and only then could he be logical in saying that it's wrong to say that you're free to embrace and profess that religion. You see, there's a connection there. Think wrong, believe wrong, you won't save your soul. Otherwise, what could be wrong with thinking wrong if there's no penalty attached? Why don't you do number 17?
Yes, well, 17 flows out of 16. It is evil to believe. We must have at least good hope concerning the eternal salvation of all those who in no wise are in the true Church of Christ. And this brings us to number 18.
Oh, it is evil to believe that Protestantism is nothing else than a different form of the same true Christian religion, in which it is possible to serve God as well as in the Catholic Church. Now, I'm going to tell you a little secret here, ladies and gentlemen. We, of course, are very ecumenical in our day, and we toss the word Christian around anywhere and everywhere. The Unitarians are Christians. They'll tell you so. I love the Unitarians. They're very churchy and they don't believe in anything. I'd like to be that way myself, actually. You heard about how the Ku Klux Klan drove the Unitarian family out of the neighborhood? Burned a question mark on their lawn. But I was just there, actually. I was just at a Unitarian church in Baltimore. There's a point to this. I'm actually coming to it. It's just
good.
Yes, I like it when I'm sort of connected to coherence. But the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore is a beautiful thing, built back in the 1820s. Tiffany glass. It's it's gorgeous. There's a cross in the center of the sanctuary, a Tiffany cross. There's no corpus, of course, but then on either side, added about 1960, as the guide told me, are the symbols of Islam and Judaism on the one hand and Hinduism and Buddhism on the other. They used to have kneelers, my guide told me, but they took them out, and I said, well, why? And he said, well, we used to pray, now we meditate. I said, I see. When did you take them out? He said, 1956. But the part I liked best about this particular parish, and I'm going to leap on one more consideration to calling something Christian, is that there were a number of pamphlets in the pamphlet rack, and one of them was from the national organization, the Unitarian Universalist Association, based in the beautiful city of Boston. And this held up Unitarian Universalism as a good church home for gays, lesbians, and bisexuals. I found out that the local parish was far more open because it billed itself in its pamphlet as a serious spiritual alternative for the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community. I don't even know who they are. I've been trying to figure it out. I mean, I've got two possibilities that come to mind, but I'm not going to ask. I don't know anyone I'd ask, so it's one of those mysteries we leave to faith.
The point.
Oh, there is a point.
You said there was a point.
There is a point, and I will get to it. The point is that if you ask the Unitarians if they are Christian, they will tell you, of course we are. Absolutely. Well, you don't believe that Christ is the Son of God? Well, no. You don't believe Christ is divine? No. To be a Unitarian, you don't even have to believe in God. No. No. We're committed to nurturing an ongoing dialogue. Is it raining? It was amazing. And of course, you've got to stand there and keep a straight face. It's amazing. Well, the thing is, it gets further. I remember when I was a little boy that when the Arabs and the Israelis were having a problem, the Buddhist Secretary General of the UN, U Thant, as he was then, sat down with Nasser of Egypt, who was a Muslim, of course, and I guess not Golda Meir, but whoever preceded her as Prime Minister of Israel, was Jewish, said, now come on, let's sit down and talk about this like good Christians. Well, gang, Christian is a word that's come to mean nothing. So what you have to ask yourself, when he says that it's not part of the Christian religion, what he makes reference to is simply this. Christ gave us a certain revelation. A central part of it are things like transubstantiation and the 7 sacraments, the veneration to the Blessed Virgin Mary and her Immaculate Conception, which, by the way, tells us an awful lot ultimately about the nature of original sin and the nature of our own fall, her glorious assumption into heaven, and on and on and on and on, all the things that flow out of this stuff. How can you really be a Christian and deny a major part of what Christ himself taught? If there were a group of philosophers called the Biersachians, okay, and I pass myself off as a disciple of Biersach, and I say he was a great moral teacher, and then he says, well, great, do you agree with him in this case? No. Well, how about in that case? No. Oh, he was wrong there. Oh, no, I don't believe that. Well, how do you agree with Biersach at all? Oh, he was a nice guy, and he said be nice, and, so I'm a Biersach. Well, no, I'm not a Biersachian. I can call myself whatever I like, and you, as a matter of courtesy, can call me that. But don't be confused. I'm no Biersachian. Don't be confused about that. And you see, through using certain terms out of courtesy, as we have for a long time, we tend to believe them. Now, lest you think I'm being harsh, or lest you think that Pius IX was suffering from some sort of an attack, I would recommend you to read Pius XI's Mortalium Animos. I recommend that to your reading. He goes into all this question very thoroughly.
Could I toss in a few things?
Please.
Have you made your point?
Well, I wanted to tell the story about the Unitarian and the Jehovah's Witness, but go ahead.
If I let you tell that, can I say something?
I don't want to say it now. I'll drop it on them later.
All right, okay. American culture is based on the idea of the melting pot, which is based on the idea of let's all get along. That is,
as Rodney King said.
Yes, that's right. Let's all get along. That is, if two people come together and they disagree on a religious issue, we are encouraged as Americans to dispense with the issue and just worry about being our good friends.
If we disagree, obviously the question isn't that important.
And St. Teresa of Avila, of whom you may have heard, once said, "It is great folly to be willing to violate the friendship of God rather than the law of human friendship." That is, the friendship with your fellow man, where does that fit in your priorities with your friendship with God? And as for this last proposition, which tells us that Protestants are outside the church, and then that makes us think, well, what about all our friends that are Protestants? I've got lots of them.
Me too.
And what am I supposed to do? Tell them they're outside the church? I've done that recently. Lost a friend over it.
How is Father? Oh, sorry.
No, this was a friend since high school. And he, I don't think, is any longer my friend. But you see, this is not stuff that I pulled out of my hat. Are any of you follow any of the devotions of St. Peter Julian Eimard?
You may not realize if you are, but if you're one of these Eucharistic devotion people, these perpetual adoration or like into exposition of the Blessed Sacrament and praying in front of that kind of stuff, then almost everything you're doing was sort of codified in the last century by St. Peter Julian Eimard, who of course was French.
And this is what he had to say, and I quote, People often say it is better to be a good Protestant than a bad Catholic. That is not true. That would mean that one could be saved without the true faith. No, underlined, no. A bad Catholic remains a child of the family, although a prodigal. And however great a sinner he may be, he still has a right to mercy. Through his faith, a bad Catholic is nearer to God than a Protestant, for he is a member of the household whereas the heretic is not.
And of course, the other thing one has to bear in mind too is that it isn't a question of, I've got the true faith, na 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 na. No, no, no. What it does is it puts an obligation upon those of us who have a lot of Protestant, Jewish, clerical, whatever friends. It puts an obligation upon us to attempt to give them the faith. You see, and that, I do believe in my heart of hearts that the biggest problem we have with this particular area of the faith is just that. Ultimately, we don't want to do anything ourselves. It's always been easier for Catholics to gossip than to evangelize. It's what we're best at. We're good at it. Doesn't require any risk on our part. Makes us feel justified and good all over, like a cheap suit. And, it's great. The only problem is that if you've got a close non-Catholic friend, and you are not attempting in one way or another to get the faith to him, her, or them, it's rather as if they were starving and you denied them food. That's the problem, you see. And so when one says, well, I don't want to damage our friendship, if that's the way I feel, how much is my friendship worth to anybody? Really? And what kind of a friend am I? Not a very good one. Unless you think that this is a rhetorical thing on my part, don't. Because, of course, before I came to see all this stuff, I think back on all the lost opportunities I had, all the times I kept my mouth shut, and I can't help but think. Although I have to say I never did stoop to sending out happy holiday Christmas cards. That's one thing I've got in my favor.
Of course, neither did St. Teresa of Avila, but look what she wrote.
Ooh, well, I get to read.
You get to read this
I get
one.
to read the nasty one.
It's the shortest one.
I can't believe St. Teresa of Avila would say this. She was so sweet. Hell is where Lutherans go. Gee willikers. Episcopalians go to West Hell, if anyone's interested. It's very nice there. I've been. It's quite nice. It's restricted in living community, It's no riffraff.
Okay, with that in mind, we have to press on.
I want to talk more about West Hell. No.
I know, but we're going to...
Section 4.
Section 4. Would you cover that while I look ahead at Section 5?
You do that. All right. What's condemned here is socialism. Now, I'm not going to go into any specific, propositions, because he doesn't. Rather, he condemns at once, and he shows you where he condemns them. Socialism, communism, secret societies. We don't have a problem here yet. Biblical societies and clerico-liberal societies. Well, don't snicker at clerico-liberals. I was taught by them. Biblical societies. Now, I don't think we need to belabor socialism, communism. Secret societies, of course, are things like the Freemasons. All right? But biblical societies, what's wrong with spreading the Bible? Well, the problem with it is that something like the Gideons or whatever are spreading Protestant Bibles, tainted texts. And
are you telling us that the Protestant Bible is
wrong? Yes.
It has error in it?
It has error. And that's something, I'll tell you what, you don't need to read the Syllabus of Errors to know that. There have been so many...
Didn't somebody count 3,000 errors in the King James Version?
Mm-hmm.
Not spelling errors.
It says giveth in there? Who says giveth?
Dogmatic errors. 3,000.
Just to give
and
you
that's in the books they kept, don't forget.
They cut out
chucked
7. So there's a little problem there. And then as far as clerical-liberal societies go, even back as early as the 19th century, groups of priests would get themselves together in favor of some liberal political group thing. Priests for the reunion of Italy, priests for the abolition of conscious thought, that kind of stuff. Also, they would have things like, well, again, some of our priest councils today would come under this category. And for that matter also, during the period when the Soviets occupied Eastern Europe, they had what were called organizations of peace priests. And these were basically people who were, for one reason or another, totally pro-communist.
Would these bishop conventions...
No!
Okay.
Don't you even think that. The National Conference of Catholic Bishops is guided by the Holy Ghost in everything it does.
Right, okay. The grammar's awful, but never mind. Okay, we're going to...
I'm sorry. They are guided by the Holy Ghost in everything they do.
Okay.
Is that an error?
That was a grammatical error. For which, as a writer, I may go to hell anyway, so...
Okay, Section 5 is errors concerning the church and its rights, which are... A lot of them don't apply to things that have happened in this country and would take a lot of explanation, and we are running short on time. So let us skip down to number 39, which in a way encompasses all of the 10 propositions before it anyway, and gets us into the nitty-gritty of where the Pope is headed here. Okay, number 39. It is evil to believe that the state of the Commonwealth, inasmuch as it is the origin and source of all rights, exercises a certain right bound by no limits.
Now that, basically what is being hit there is the self-declared right of the state to define by itself, and with no reference to the faith, morality. That is what is being hit. No. It wasn't totalitarians that came in and at gunpoint forced the Supreme Court to rule that an infant before it's born isn't a human being. It's not the Supreme Court. It's not totalitarians who rushed the Supreme Court in and forced them to permit pornography. No. It does. Yes, totalitarians are the most obvious example, but any state that is, practically speaking, regardless of what it calls itself, guided by nothing save expedience, is such a state when it arrogates to itself the right to define in the realm of morals.
Or say, how would you feel if you came out of Mass one day and there were some policemen standing there who told you that the communion you had just received wasn't valid just because they said so? Okay? It was just bread. Transubstantiation is not a fact, and you're wasting your time. Well, they haven't done that, but what have they done to the sacrament of marriage?
Ooh, that sounds like a build-up to another one. Yep. You're right.
Well, okay. Well,
but yes, it is, but unfortunately it's further on in errors concerning Christian marriage. But yes, it's from this. Notice, everything he touches on has consequences. And what he's really doing, if you sit down and read the whole thing, is every point he makes, he explores the consequences therefrom. Yes, our state have arrogated to themselves the right to define the sacrament of marriage, the right to permit divorce, even amongst Catholics. And it recognizes this. Now, see, we're so used to this, and we take it as a matter of course. And the fact that we're a small minority in this country, and we say, well, how could it be otherwise? You know, you see, there are many evils that can't be cured, and so you've got to endure them. That's one thing. But what we do is, having endured it so long, we cease to notice that it's an evil. Oh, well, it's just the way other people do it. I didn't. And that is the danger here. Understand something, ladies and gentlemen. What he is proposing here is not necessarily a practical political program. He's not saying you've got to make President Clinton go along with the syllabus of errors, you won't vote for him. He's not saying that. What he is trying to do is to get you to clear your mind of garbage. Your mind. From that, you've got to do whatever you do. But the first thing is to get your own head clear.
Well, speaking of minds and putting garbage in them...
Yes, please.
Do go to number 47.
Oh, number 47. Gosh. The best state...
It is evil to believe that.
What's that?
It is evil
Oh,
to
I'm
believe
sorry,
that.
thank you. It is... no, I'm afraid to say this. I'm afraid to say it's evil. It's my right as an American. It is evil to believe that the best state of civil society demands that the people's schools, which are open to all children of any class of people, and the public institutions in general, which are destined for the teaching of literature and the more exact studies, and for caring for the education of youth, should be exempted from all authority, control, and power of the church, and be subjected to the full authority of the civil and political power, exactly according to the pleasure of the rulers and the standard of current public opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, you just saw the public school system take it to the head.
And by a pope yet.
And by a pope. Knocked it with his cruiser. It fell right over. Now, what we have just been told is that the public schools are an objective evil. Not, mind you, not when we think of public schools as they are today. I mean, that's obvious. You know, they're dangerous. That's an objective evil, too. You know, I would say that going into the Coliseum when the lions are out, that's an objective evil because you're endangering yourself. But he's even saying here that the dear old McGuffey Reader, apple on the desk type place, the Norman Rockwell-esque thing, is evil. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. What is being implied here is that there is no such thing as neutral education. You are being taught something when you go to school. I had the advantage, I think, of having been in both public and Catholic schools. I actually spent 2 years at Virgil Junior High. At the time, we had the most stabbings of any school in the L.A. City School District. It was our great claim to fame. I enjoyed it.
I went to a Catholic school. We had more drugs than the public school just a quarter of a mile away. So
get a life. What do you think our knifings were about? Cigarettes? But this was a useful experience for me. Not because the knifings. Actually, I didn't have too much trouble. In those days, my accent was a bit thicker than it is. You know what I'm saying? So the Mexican people I was with, they didn't have a problem with that. But what happened was the health classes. What happened were the civics classes. What happened were the history classes. Most people didn't pay any attention. They were too busy, doing drugs and knifing each other, which was, much better than if they'd been sitting there believing it. Because remember, most of these kids were Catholic of one sort or another. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. So, anyway.
Okay, we've got to move along.
Oh, and it's your turn to sit on the hot seat.
Okay, skip down to number 55.
My country, 'tis of thee.
Everyone take a deep breath, because it is evil to believe that the church is to be separated from the state and the state from the church.
There goes the apple pie.
There goes Americanism.
Oh, how can you say that?
There goes 90% of every politician's jingling change in his pockets. Yeah, we got to separate church and state.
Well, it's right there in the Constitution. It's no,
right
it's
there
not.
in the Bill of Rights.
No, it's not. It ain't no place.
It ain't no place.
Now, at this point, the objection may be made, well, what church would you have united to the state? Well, again, I'm not going to pretend that you have here, obviously, if you had a majority of Catholics in this country, we wouldn't have a problem. The answer would be obvious. The situation that we're in is rather more difficult. It's rather like that of the Roman Empire, when Catholics were still a small minority. But you may remember that by dint of a few centuries of hard labor and some martyrdom and other things which I'm making sound very easy, which of course weren't, they converted their country. And the Roman Empire became a Catholic state under the Emperor Theodosius. And even though it was finally broken down physically, shall we say, in another sense it has never ceased to be. Now, if you ask me, well, how would you set up the Catholic state in America? The answer is you wouldn't, because it's not a Catholic country. But what you must understand is that separation from church and state is an objectively and intrinsically unnatural and evil setup. The only answer, of course, is to convert the country. And that can only be done, since we're dialoguing at higher levels, that has to be done by all of us. And it also means that you and I will probably never see the end of it. But you got to remember that these early missionaries you read about, St. Boniface and the apostles and all those people, they didn't go around saying, gee, we're going to form us Christian civilization. We've got to call it Christendom. No. Rather, they did what the Catholic faith demands of them. They evangelized. And, in God's good time, and with His grace, on everyone doing their part, these things happen naturally.
Actually, if you back up a step and say no, well, not no, but the first duty of every Catholic is is to save your own soul. Have a devotional life. Okay, you can't save anyone else's soul until you have first saved your own, or at least worked very
Working
hard.
toward.
Working towards.
Otherwise,
Sorry.
you'll just be
Otherwise
interceding.
you'll just- okay. All right. So it isn't a matter of just going out there and single-handedly storming the country. No, because that won't work. All right. But if each Catholic were to develop a strong devotional life and tell their closest friends, just the people that come across their paths in their daily life, you'd be surprised how many people would become Catholics. And we're not saying, and neither was Pius IX, saying that suddenly we have to have a referendum and change the United States into a different form of government and all this. No. However, if the other propositions that we looked at have any weight, that is, if you have to believe certain things to save your soul, and if you don't believe them, you go to hell, then the government, a good government, would assist the population in saving their souls. And therefore, a good government would set up a totally different way of doing things, in which the real good of each person is their salvation, and not their health benefits, and all the other things that they dangle in front of us these days.
What about health care?
And we have to press on.
Oh, I wanted to play with health care.
No.
Okay. My turn. Oh, my land. He just nut down separation of church. Oh, why don't we trade? I'll do the separation of church and state. You do this one.
We just did separation of church and state.
You're saying I'm stuck.
Oh, no, I'll do it if you
No,
want.
I'll fine. Be that way.
Number
All
60.
Right. Number 60. It is evil to believe that authority is nothing more than numbers and the sum of material strengths.
There goes democracy.
Right down the tubes. But of course, we don't believe that anyway. You know how I know we don't believe that? We don't believe in democracy. I mean, we talk about believing in democracy all the time. We go on and on about democracy. But you know something funny? Notice how in recent years, small minorities are able to determine, in large part, key portions of the national agenda. Now, I was having a discussion with my bank teller about this, oddly enough. It's funny that I go to a strange bank, not the one that moonlights at Bennigan's, the other one, the German one. Anyway, no, one of my bank tellers moonlights at... The point is that she, and I were chatting about this, was saying, well, you know, isn't it terrible? We got it started, it was in Germany, due to this one couple suing. The German Supreme Court ordered that all the crucifixes be taken down from the classrooms, which had never been done. And she said, and she's going on, you know, in my day, in Germany, you know, they would never have dreamt of doing that. And I said, well, the funny thing is, they claimed that as anthroposophists, which is a religious group that I won't go into their teachings, they claimed that as anthroposophists, it was a terrible thing for them to have to look at the crucifix. Well, the court rules in their favor, and then the anthroposophists say, that is the organization, say, no, we don't believe that. We like the crucifixes too. So then we got into this and on to other things, and finally she says, well, you know, I guess we have to accommodate and all that. And I said, we do, huh? Well, let me ask you, what's democracy? Oh, the majority rule. Well, wait. The majority rule. I said, okay, so you say the majority rule, except when the minority disagree. Okay, I understand now. So in reality, we don't believe in democracy either. We say we do. It's our mantra, you know, we're like Hindu meditation people. But we don't really believe in it. In point of fact, in our country, as in any other country that has ever existed, he who shouts loudest gets served. And every country has been ruled by a minority, and every country always will be. What really matters is the nature of that minority. Now here, we are told that the doctrine that we say we believe, although of course, as I've tried to point out, we deny in fact, is wrong. So the Pope, you see, again brings us back to earth. As I've said, and I think this is something I could prove fairly well historically, no society has ever been ruled by the majority of people. It's always been ruled by whoever happened to be running it. And what the Pope is telling us is that were it possible to do the other, that would be wrong. And also I would say that a minority that perhaps rules invoking this doctrine is wrong. Your turn.
Number 64. We've shot down separation in church and state. We've shot down democracy. Now let's shoot down the American Revolution.
Oh, boy, I like that.
As we all know, the Founding Fathers were wonderful people, right? The noblest of the noble.
If you get the Founding Fathers, I get James Bond.
All right. Number 64. It is evil to believe that the violation of any most sacred oath and even any criminal and disgraceful action repugnant to eternal law not only must by no means be reproved, but is even altogether lawful and worthy of the highest praise when it is done for love of country.
What's wrong with that? James Bond, remember? 007. He had the cyanide tablet, you know, and if ever he was caught by the enemy,
He'd commit
chomp
suicide.
on it. Well, yes, but he'd chomp on the... See, you don't say suicide. He'd chomp on the cyanide pill and die rather than give up his secrets to the enemies of his country. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's wonderful.
Violate eternal law. Sure.
For love of country. What could be better?
And all our Founding Fathers took an oath of loyalty to the king.
But they all broke it, so
Oops.
it's okay. Oops.
Oops. Well, they just kind of discarded it.
Yeah, but then they turned around and made everyone swear oaths to them.
Oh, well.
So, you see, they didn't break their oaths, they just made new ones.
Okay. Moving right along. Errors concerning Christian marriage.
Oh, boy. Now, you remember what we said earlier about a government arrogating to itself the right to decide about sacraments. Well, let's see what they have to say. Let's get on to proposition number 66. It is evil to believe that the sacrament of matrimony is nothing but an appendage to the contract and separable from it, and the sacrament itself consists merely in the nuptial blessing. And this, by the way, is the argument that is often used by Catholic arguers on such things, to say that to the state properly does belong the supervision of marriage. And this is how they're able to justify, well, the state's actions in the case of non-Catholics and so on.
And just as the state controls marriage, state controls divorce. So number 67 flows from it. It is evil to believe that by natural law the bond of matrimony is not indissoluble, and in various cases divorce, properly so called, can be sanctioned by civil authority. Divorce is wrong, but the state says it's okay.
Well, now we're going to skip a whole bunch of areas. Why? Well, partly because of time. Again, the marriage questions, understand every one of these propositions is worthy of your consideration.
Yes.
But
when Mr. Coulombe and I did this talk once before, we spent 3 two-hour sessions with a group going through all the propositions.
So that's why we're not doing
so
more
we're kind of rushing.
Lest you think that we're trying to cheese you out of something really important.
We could do one
but
on every darn one, but...
we're not going to.
Okay, skip down to number 77.
We're coming to the end now, gang.
Okay, these last 5 propositions flow one into the other. They're almost like a complete sentence.
And we're going to treat them like a complete sentence, almost kind of.
Okay, number 77. It is evil to believe that, in this age of ours, it is no longer expedient that the Catholic religion should be the only religion of the state to the exclusion of all other cults whatsoever.
It is evil to believe that, therefore, hence, in certain regions of the Catholic name, it has been laudably sanctioned by law that men immigrating there be allowed to have public exercises of any worship of their own.
Likewise, number 79, it is evil to believe that it is false that the civil liberty of every cult and likewise the full power granted to all of let me say that again. It is evil to believe, how do I state this?
Oh, just say, for it is false. They know it's evil. You said
Okay.
it 4 times.
For it is
They
false
now they won't.
that the civil liberty of every cult and likewise the full power granted to all of manifesting openly and publicly any kind of opinions and ideas more easily leads to the corruption of the morals and minds of the people and to the spread of the evil of indifferentism.
From these 3 flows the last and worst.
Let's say this last one together like a Greek chorus.
They'll shoot us at once. Guy, is this like Clytemnestra?
Yes.
Okay.
Number 80.
It is evil to believe that the Roman pontiff can and should reconcile and adapt himself to progress,
liberalism, and the modern civilization.
Now, at this point on the left, on come a group of cardinals discussing.
Disgusting?
Well, that too. Cardinal Bernardine, Cardinal...
What
Anyway,
has been the whole theme for the last 30 years?
and
Adapting to progress, liberalism, and modern civilization.
And see, what is hard for us to realize, because we are a society and a culture that has about a 10-minute attention span, is that Pius IX, and he wasn't the only one by a long shot, but he was the Pope at the time, saw where trends that were already present in his day were going to lead. You see, things have consequences. You don't just get up and do this or that and nothing happens. Everything you do, ladies and gentlemen, everything you think and everything you say has a result of some sort. You know it's true in your life. If it is my custom to drink a bottle of gin every night before I go to bed, there will be results from this. In the immediate, they may be fairly pleasant, but there will be results. I may find it a tad hard to hold a job. If I find it hard to hold a job, and if I don't have wealthy relations who are willing to pay me to breathe, then guess what? I will not be able to pay my rent. And then, if I'm no longer able to pay my rent, I will doubtless join the ranks of the homeless. Being amongst the homeless, I may be prey to all sorts of illness and crime. Now, I do not actually have to go through that entire sequence for you to notice when I drink a bottle of gin, no mix, just gin, every night, just prior to going to bed. You don't have to be a spiritual reader or a tarot card specialist to know that I'm going to have problems and life will be unpleasant. So too with Pius IX. He knew where these ideas would lead us, and they have.
The hard part about where we find ourselves is that it's like waking up behind enemy lines, but finding out that you're the enemy.
As Pogo Possum
Because
said.
this stuff permeates us. I mean, Mr. Coulombe and I are up here going through this, but don't think we're totally clean of this, that this doesn't affect us. Of course it affects us. I mean, I was raised an American, just like most of you, to be proud of my country, to be proud of the founding fathers.
I served in our armed forces, swore the oath of allegiance to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Well, I was 1H, but never mind.
Yeah, but if I meant that oath, though, I'd have to shoot the
Well, I had to take a similar oath when I took a job. Well, never mind. All right, so yes, these things are hard. They boggle the mind. Well, as someone wiser than myself once said, let it boggle the mind. There's nothing like a good boggling to shake up the old gray matter. And if nothing else, we'd really encourage you to take these home, read them, look them up for yourself. It's all in Denzinger. And then you might want to start thinking about it some.